and welcome to the Irish NFL Show review of Week 12. Thanks for joining us for another week of Talking Points. My name is Shane Brennan. Tonight I'm joined by Brian O'Leary, Kieran Boyle and Noel Dowling as we take a look back at some of the things which has kept our mouths watering as we head into Thanksgiving week of football. We'd like to remind everybody, of course, firstly, if you're listening just from the United States, if you have a connection to America, happy Thanksgiving week. We hope that you and your families all enjoy this. This is certainly a lot of football and a lot of things to feast on, but more importantly, if you are in Dublin, the thing we really want to see is see you guys meet up with us on Thursday in Buskers on the Ball as we will be enjoying the action. I've just had my Thanksgiving t-shirt printed. It has a nice cartoon turkey in the back of it with a bit of football, and I'm sure as much as I'll be dressed like a turkey, I'm sure Brian and Noel might feel like a couple of hams wearing their Giants and Bears jerseys as they face up against the Cowboys and Lions respectively. But who knows? Crazy things happen in American football. But main thing to remember, guys, is that it is free entry. There's game kick off at 5:30, but it goes on all evening. You're free to come and go as you please. €6 points all night, and we will be there ready to have the crack with you all night. And of course, I'd like to remind everybody as well that we are a part of the New York Jets' first ever official watch party in Ireland on Sunday, the 8th of December. Tickets to that can be found on our social media and website as well. Before we get into tonight's program, I'd like to also remind you that the show is brought to you by QuimBet. And no, I have to say, when I was looking at this one before the year, I wasn't quite sure what odds you would have got on QuimBet for the Eagles. Really being able to keep track with the Lions in the race for the NFC in the race for the NFC top seed, but to be able to do so in such a way which not many of us are really talking about them. When we look at how they performed on Sunday Night Football last night, Saquon Barkley getting 255 rushing yards plus another 50 and change in the passing game as he put on a stellar performance. But the Eagles at large put on a great performance as they managed to put away the Rams. It is now almost 2 months since their last loss. They've won 7 in a row and are now sitting at 9-2. Yet the conversation has been taken up so much by teams in the NFC North. And I feel like if the Eagles are playing like this last year, we would be talking them up for real Super Bowl contenders. The fact that almost they've been going about their business quietly this year means that I think a lot of people may have glossed over them. At what point do we have to sit back and look at this Eagles team and go, actually, considering they're only in a Super Bowl 2 years ago, these guys are very, very serious challengers for that Lombardi trophy?
I think now. I think we're in that situation where, to me anyway, it looks like the Eagles are going to be that team in the NFC that are going to challenge the Lions. I think the Eagles and the Lions feel like they're sort of separating themselves now from the rest of the pack. I know the Vikings and the Packers will argue that they're 8 and 9 wins. They're up there as well. But when you just watch this Eagles team at the moment, and obviously Barkley is a massive part of that. He's a piece of the jigsaw they didn't have last year. They always had talent there. They always had good offensive players and a good defense that could challenge teams. But Barkley has come in, and what a signing that's been. Week in, week out, he's just churning out the yards, whether it's on the ground or in the air. And he's just been a massive boost to this, as I say, already talented offense. I mean, I think the big question for the Eagles from last season was everybody knew they were talented. Everybody knew they could win games, but we watched that collapse last season. And we came into this season wondering, which Eagles are we getting? Are we getting the team that started the season and kind of blew teams away and went into that massive, lead in terms of games won? Or are we getting the one on the second part of the season that collapsed? And I think you're right. They've been kind of quiet. It feels like no one has talked about them recently, even with the wins they've been getting. But I think they're there for all to see. I mean, I think Jalen Hurts has looked really, really efficient and really good at doing it on the ground or through the air himself. You mentioned Barkley. I think this victory.
I think it's good that no one has stalled because we can
I think the Eagles team are.
Sorry, no. I think the internet is cutting you off. I'm not quite sure whether.
I think it went. Am I still here now?
I don't know. I think maybe the Giants Illuminati might be trying to stop some of the Saquon Barkley talk, which is unfortunate, Brian, because that's kind of where I'm heading. Because, look, I mean, the way the offense and obviously the Saquon Barkley is that added X factor. When I was previewing the game, I was wondering who would have had the more X factor between the Rams and the Eagles. Was it going to be the Rams wide receivers, who in fairness had a very decent game, or was it going to be Saquon? And Saquon just completely wiped the floor with any expectations that he might have even a semi-muted game. But I think one part of the Phillies defense that I think isn't getting talked about enough is how well their defense has been playing, how aggressive they have been, not only in being able to challenge receivers midair, been able to swat the ball down. But in terms of the quarterback pressure, I thought the quarterback pressure was an area where they really managed to show themselves in a very good light last night. Mitt Williams getting a couple of sacks. I think the Eagles got 5 sacks overall. They managed to shut down Matthew Stafford pretty quickly, because when Stafford was given the time to throw, he was throwing some pretty accurate throws. So they knew that they needed to give him as little time on the ball as possible. And I think our defense is definitely a place where I thought the Eagles are probably building nicely, even though all the attention will naturally be taken up by Saquon.
I think their defense adjusted very well last night. If you watch the game from a very early stage with Kieran, what we did last night stateside, the first 2 drives for the Rams, they went up and down the field on them, and the score wasn't reflective of what we'd seen, because obviously the fumble, which came in a timely manner for the Eagles defense. Bearing in mind they were in the red zone, they got an opportunity to knock the ball out of Williams. And then on the next drive, was essentially looked like a copycat type of drive, mixed with the run pass option. But over the course of the 4 quarters, they started to get, as you touched on there, they started to gradually get to Matthew Stafford. Some concerns, I would say, more injury concerns. Obviously, Graham has confirmed that he's out for the season, and then you've got Slay going off injured in the 3rd quarter. That's a huge hole for them. It'd be interesting to see how they manage those situations. But yeah, you're right. Like this team are playing as a group collectively at the moment, arguably one of the best in the league. And what's really interesting with Saquon's numbers, if you look at the last 2 games, the Washington game and this one, a lot of the numbers are coming in the second half. So it's like the gradual effect of wearing these teams down over the course of 4 quarters, and then he's going off with these highlight reel plays, which it was a bit of a copycat to what we saw against the Commanders on the Thursday Night Football in terms of similarities to the touchdown he scored. Jalen Hurts, for me, is coming back and playing at the level in which we saw 2 years ago. He looks a lot more composed. There's a great mixture of the run pass option, which I suppose they can cater for now, because teams are very mindful of Saquon Barkley. But it just looks like they're getting back to similarities to what we saw 2 years ago, when this balanced offense led them all the way to the Super Bowl. But some big games ahead this Sunday in particular. Obviously, we've got Monday Night Football to come, but they're on the road in Baltimore on Sunday, and we always keep talking about these teams that get hyped up after a number of wins. Then they go into this measuring stick type of game, and can they come out the right side of it? Like, they're on the road on Sunday. It's a huge test, with going up against one of the stellar AFC teams.
Kieran, when we talk about NFC teams and measuring stick games, I feel like the 49ers have had quite a lot of them coming up this season. Of course, they were the ones who were the NFC champions last time out, and I think we were expecting a lot more from them this season than we are getting. They are certainly sitting at 5-6. They were defeated 38-10 yesterday by the Packers. Now, this is a game where once you heard that Brock Purdy came out, I think a lot of people expectations, which were maybe semi-low enough, completely dropped for the Niners. It's a little bit unusual, considering that in the past, the Niners have been the one team that have managed to find ways to make it work with backup quarterbacks. But that just was not the case against the Packers. What really showed me up, or what I found really surprising, was just the nature of that. I don't really think that the San Francisco defense are playing hard enough to try and keep Green Bay quiet. I thought the Green Bay managed to get a nice bit of room. Josh Jacobs had over 100 yards. Jordan Love wasn't picked off. And I think that if it wasn't for the fact that the Packers wide receivers keep dropping a lot of passes, they could have won this game by a lot more. I think the Packers are the team with the most drop passes in the NFL. There was a couple of really bad ones late in the first half. Like, I don't know. I just don't really see much from the San Francisco side, particularly on the defensive side, that makes me think that they can get it right in time for the playoffs this year.
Couple of things. I mean, they're still right in the hunt in the NFC West. I mean, they haven't lost a huge amount of ground despite how terribly they've been playing. Now, when you don't have Purdy and you don't have Trent Williams and you don't have Bosa starting out there, you're handicapped a huge amount right out the gate. I think we all picked the Packers from last week. I think it was just, it's trending. The Niners, we've talked about it at length about they're not the same team as they were, but it's their inability to score right now, which is probably the most concerning thing for Shanahan. And he looks extremely stressed. Any shots on the sideline, he's growing a beard out, but he doesn't look as composed and as cool as he has the last couple of years. Now, a team like this can't sustain all these injuries, and they've had a huge amount of injuries. And McCaffrey, again, we don't know what his condition is. He's clearly not as good as he's been the last couple of years. I think he only managed 31 yards on the ground, and that's not going to be enough for the Niners to do anything. But again, the Packers, they weren't even spectacular. They didn't do a huge amount either. They were just, I don't want to say pedestrian because they still put up 38 points on an NFL team, but they were never really never really troubled. When you heard that Allen was starting for the 49ers, that's your indication right there. There's probably a lot of people scrambling into fantasy teams and moving some players out. Kittle showed up like Kittle does, but he's a baller. He'll play no matter who's behind center. But this was one of those games where they just could not sustain the amount of injuries that keep piling up week on week. A player that I'll talk about again, and we'll probably bring it up later in the Giants talk. Xavier McKinney had his 7th interception of the season. I mean, what another let go from the Giants. But he's been having a great season, and that Packers secondary, they've been quietly putting some work in. But it's the kind of the run of the mill, Packers win, and those wide receivers it was almost like death by 1,000 cuts. There was no way the Niners were going to get into that game, do any kind of damage at all. It was almost damage limitation to a certain extent. But the bottom line is, and the amount of injuries they've had, there's no way the Niners could have put up any kind of performance in that game.
Brian, it's mad actually when we're looking at where the Packers are sitting. They are 3rd in the NFC North. They are sitting at 8-3, and you see performances like Josh Jacobs, who managed to run in for 3 touchdowns as well. As just what they've generally been able to do when they come against strong teams, they've managed to pull out strong performances, as was the case against San Francisco yesterday. You have to wonder if the Vikings start to wobble, or what way this playoff picture and the business end of the seasons we are now entering into will shake up for this Packers team. Because you remember last year, it was this time of year when they really started to kick into gear, and they ended up going as far into the playoffs, where they got that big win in Dallas. I don't think there's been a single performance where you look at this Packers team and say, yeah, these guys are pretty awesome, but they're doing just enough to keep all their fundamentals right. And I think 1 or 2 little tweaks here and there, particularly when it comes to things like ball security and being able to make the most out of every possession that they have, there is definitely potential there for the Packers to do some real damage.
Yeah, look, I think the Packers are going to make the playoffs. I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion. They're in a very competitive division, as Noel knows well. You look at 3 teams there between them. One team only 1 loss. You got the Vikings with 2 losses, and then you got the Packers, who in any other season 8-3 would be delighted with the form which they're showing, and yet they're 3rd in the division. The next 5 weeks are an acid test for them, because like last year, you touched on it there, Thanksgiving Day was actually when that run essentially started last year. They went into Detroit, and Detroit were heavy favourites in that game, and they beat them. They're going to start on Thursday night now, a run of primetime games. I think they're back-to-back primetime games for the next 4 between Sunday and Monday games, which signifies what the league think of the Packers in terms of the expectations we're going into the season. It'll be interesting to see how they handle the dynamics of playing these isolated games, because there's another level to when you're playing on Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. It starts on Thursday against the Dolphins team right now, and I know we're going to come to it later against your Patriots, but they're winning comprehensively at the moment, and we did touch on recently where just the Dolphins team could go on a run now, and they're going for 4 in a row. And this game, which a few weeks ago looked like, I wouldn't say a foregone conclusion, now has a different aspect on Thursday night. It'd be interesting to see how the Packers play against a team that are right now in better form than the 49ers are. The 49ers, on the other hand, they got to go to Buffalo on Sunday. It's not getting any easier for this team.
No, we've run through the 2 NFC West teams who have come against defeat scores. Only one NFC West team came out victors this week, and that was the Seattle Seahawks, who managed to surpass the Arizona Cardinals. A matchup where I was expecting a lot more from the Cardinals offense in particular. And I think there's probably 2 sides to that coin. I wasn't 100% sure as to Kyler Murray's ability to get up plays at times when it really mattered. He did end up racking nearly 300 yards, but that was all in that midsection of the game. When it came to red zone offense, when it came to being able to punch things in, the Cardinals just did not show the ruthlessness you need when you're trying to beat these divisional opponents and try to make the playoffs. And then you look on the other side, I think this is a game when the Seattle defense really showed up to be quite strong, to be quite physical, and to keep things locked down. So I think Kieran was one of the ones who predicted that Seattle might be coming into this part of the year running nicely. Do you think that the Seahawks might be starting to gain a bit of momentum here?
It could do. I mean, you mentioned the defense, and that was the big interest for me in this game. It's a Cardinals offense, which I think can be really dynamic, but it does fall on that quarterback to be on form. If Kyler Murray is in tune and on form, that he has the weapons around him, and they can really do some damage to teams. But if he's not fully there, it can be a bit of an issue. And then on the flip side, you have a Seahawks defense, which, there's a lot expected of it because of who the new head coach is, and he's come from the Ravens, and you kind of wonder what he can do with this defense. And recently they have really been stepping it up and causing problems for teams. So this is a defense now that seems to be starting to really find itself. And on offense then, you have, say, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's had a really good run of form over the last number of weeks. So they have the weapons there, and it still seems to be kind of clicking on offense enough for them to win these games when the defense keeps them in it. So this was a massive win for the Seahawks. We've mentioned the West already and how bunched it is. We have 2 teams on 6 wins, 2 teams on 5 wins. It's going to be fascinating to see how this goes on. But I think the Seahawks team now looks like they have the weapons on offense. For me, I still have questions on Geno Smith. I think very similar to Kyler Murray. If Geno, you can get good Geno or bad Geno. And if he's on a good day, he can really make some plays and use those weapons around him. If he's on a bad day, it can look kind of bad. But I think he has enough around him to help him with that. And then we have this defense, as you mentioned, which really are stepping up. I mean, players like Devon Witherspoon look really, really good now, and they look like they're really hitting that stride. So I think the Seahawks are starting to look like they're really putting their hat in the ring to take this division. As I say, all of them are in there. All of them are close to each other. But with the 49ers going the way they're going, with the Cardinals, who I think have question marks on defense, and they need their quarterback running to really get that offense going. I think the Seahawks will look at it now and think maybe we can have a bit more balance on both sides of the ball over the rest of these teams, and can push on and fight for this division. So again, look, it'll be great to see how it comes, because there's so many of them in there that are right next to each other. So yeah, should be fun.
What I found really impressive about this one, Kieran, is that the Seahawks defense set the tone from early on. And I think that's kind of what people who bought into, and yourself included, people who bought into the idea that the Seahawks might use their home advantage to on their side when they're looking at the way that Kyler Murray plays. I think I think in the first half they had quarterback pressure in 50% of the plays, and in those that they don't, I was really impressed with the type of coverage they had. A lot of the defenders knew when to turn on their ankles and to keep tracking Kyler and to keep tracking the receivers, and they really managed to keep things locked down. And you look on the other side of the ball then at the Seahawks, it wasn't just what Geno Smith was able to do with passing to DK Metcalf. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a very good game. And it seems to when a team breaks out and a new defensive head coach coming in like Mike McDonald starts to put his stamp on a team like that and a good performance like this, in a way that they may be able to build some momentum. Plus the offense manages to find a way or break from the old molds, because in the previous few games, a lot of it was down to that partnership between Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. You have to say there definitely seems to be a lot to like from Seattle in that game, even if I think a lot of the commentary around this is very negative on what the Cardinals offense is able to do, because in fairness, their defense managed to hold Seattle down to 16 points.
Yeah, the Seahawks defense was masterful yesterday. I mean, you got the kind of factors in play. You got a storm that just went through the Pacific Northwest. You got your classic Seattle gray, rainy, miserable kind of day, weather conditions, and you got Arizona coming from the desert having to play in that weather condition. And Kyler Murray he's not exactly a master in those kind of conditions. So also the fact they shut James Conner down, he barely had anything to do with the game yesterday. So I think the story of this game is the defense from Seattle. They just did what they had to do. They made Kyler scramble. They didn't make him comfortable at all. And it was one of those games I thought, Kyler's had a good season so far, but I just felt, he's always due for these kind of games. Just lays an egg. His figures were fine, but the offense could not get going at all. I mean, like you said, he had almost 300 yards, but, not able to move much, third down issues. And that defense, Leonard Williams, another Giants cast off, 2.5 sacks. And then you got Kobe Bryant, not that Kobe Bryant, with the interception. And that was really the difference in the game. I mean, scrappy. It was very in tune with the weather. It was scrappy. It was, dirty. It was not a lot of flow in it. And that's the way the Seahawks wanted it. They wanted to make it, they want to get Kyler out of his comfort zone. They wanted to make sure that McBride, didn't go off, despite the fact he had 132 yards, but he didn't really hurt them in that regard. But masterful performance from that Seahawks defense, and another win. And they are trending upwards right now in a division that, as we've already discussed, is jam-packed.
Brian, before we head off into a quick break, I just want to touch on the matchup between the Panthers and the Chiefs. We spoke about it briefly last night in our instant reaction, but I've had a bit more time to look back over it, and a couple of things I think just stand out when I reflect on it. A lot of the talk could be on the Panthers about the way that they've just generally been improving. I think they're a much tougher opponent to face against. They probably had their best game of the season, even though they came out on the wrong side of it. But I really think this Chiefs team needs a further look, because I said it before they came into their game against the Bills that somebody had to deal a big defeat to this Chiefs team that I think had been due. And I was saying the same kind of stuff last year. A lot of the games that the Chiefs managed to come away with, it was close. And last year was even worse, I guess, because there was just no wide receiver talent really giving Patrick Mahomes much of a dig out. And now, again, they managed to scramble to get a field goal victory in Carolina. There's a lot of these games where they're just getting away with these one-score wins. Very interesting one last night that DeAndre Hopkins actually wasn't on for a hell of a lot of the snaps and didn't get a lot of targets either. An interesting one, considering obviously he's meant to be one of the great weapons that Patrick Mahomes is supposed to be using. In rushing yards, they weren't particularly great. There wasn't a standout performer on receiving, but Patrick Mahomes, in fairness to him, managed to carry it going. He got 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, and what was key was a rushing play to keep it going. So I don't know. I just really don't know what way I have to read this Chiefs team. Are there more weaknesses there than people have been able to uncover, or is it just another case where they're just keeping the best stuff in the locker for when it matters?
Well, I do think we'll see a difference. Chiefs teams come to playoffs. I think we'll all agree I still think they're worthy favourites to be thereabouts to be in the Super Bowl. The difference with Chiefs against other teams is there's always somebody that'll step up from one week to the next. And whilst DeAndre Hopkins doesn't have the greatest of games and he didn't get many looks, Noah Gray steps up and has back-to-back weeks where he's had huge games as a tight end, and he's been someone that's been bubbling in the background over the course of the last 18 months in terms of getting his production up and his playing. I suppose he's reflective of 2 touchdowns yesterday. Look, it wasn't a stellar performance. I said last night in the instant reaction, they were on a bit of a hiding to nothing going into this game. They should have won. They were expected to win by double digits. If they did, people go, oh, well, there you go. It's just the Panthers. And then they come out the right side of it and people will say, okay, you play against a team, you play tough and you find a way to win under difficult circumstances. So I don't think the Chiefs will be overly concerned. I think the Chiefs have got a bit of a run to come in, but I think things are playing nicely into their hands. They've got a Friday game this week as opposed to Sunday, and then they don't play again until Monday week against the Chargers at home. You like in itself, that's a nice little bye week essentially. That's like your Thursday to Sunday, so that's probably coming at a nice time. But then they've got they've got the Broncos, they've got the Steelers, they've got the Texans, and the Texans are out of form, but still arguably a big game. So there is big games ahead for them. But I think over the course of the next few weeks, the bigger the game, maybe the bigger the opportunity for this team, and the bigger players will step up. But yesterday, they were always going to win this game yesterday. I'm not going to get overly concerned about how poor they played it. It just looked like they were going through the motions, and ultimately it came down to Mahomes doing a bit of magic again and finding a way to get him over the line, and he did just that.
Yeah, Mahomes' magic definitely has a lot to answer for when it comes to every other team in the league, hoping that we have a different champion this year. But that's it for the first part. We will touch on Bears-Vikings after this break. Welcome back to the Irish NFL Show, Week 12 Talking Points program, and that break brought to you there by Buskers on the Ball, which has €6 points at 6 o'clock every Sunday as I show NFL Red Zone and a selection of games, and was also there will be showing the Thanksgiving slate of games this Thursday. We will be there. We hope you will join us, and one of the games that we will be watching will be as the Chicago Bears face against the Detroit Lions, another NFC North matchup to look forward to this week, Noel. And out of the last 2 that the Bears have played have been absolute nail-biters, but absolute nail-biters that have not gone the way of the Windy City. A 1-point loss against the Packers 2 weeks ago, followed by an overtime defeat against the Vikings this time around. But I have to say, the fact that the game went as far as overtime was probably a good stamp on the Bears' card, because they were 24-10 down at one point. I think it was then 27-16 before they managed to get a comeback. And it was one game, as I was mentioning in the reaction podcast last time, where from my point of view, I think it was a game where Caleb Williams performed well, but for a team that probably didn't provide a whole lot of help from most of the game. What way did you look at it, particularly from the point of view of what the Bears are able to do on offense?
Yeah, look, in terms of the Bears for this game, look, we knew the Bears' playoff hopes were gone last weekend with that Packers game. So the most important thing, I think, for the Bears going forward is Caleb Williams. Continue to develop him, continue to make sure that the player you drafted is the player you've got. And I think last night showed that, look, when he's on form, when he has a bit of time, when things are working, obviously the offensive coordinator is new, and Thomas Brown. When you create a game plan that suits this quarterback, he has all the talent in the world. Some of those tight window throws last night were unbelievable. The velocity he was getting on these throws that he was getting, it looked like they were going to Vikings defenders and they just go right through the middle, straight into Bears wide receivers. I mean, I think last night was Caleb Williams' best game as a professional for the Bears. And I think it's the player that we all kind of hoped he was going to be. It looks like if they give him a chance, he can be that player. Now, the Bears have other question marks around. I mean, players did step up last night in terms of wide receivers to make some good plays. They didn't quite get the game going on the ground, which was going to be a tough ask against this Vikings defense. But I think, look, obviously you want to win this game. I don't think Bears fans were as devastated as they had been recently, because Caleb Williams looks to have made that step, and because I think we kind of know now that the playoffs just aren't a thing going forward. And for the Vikings, look, this is a big win. It puts them to 9-2, another division win, another really close, tight-fought win that they came out on top of, which is going to be so important for them going forward, because obviously, as you mentioned earlier, you have the Lions doing what to do, and you have the Packers just right behind, a game behind. So this is a big, big win for the Vikings. And for the Bears, look, it's a positive sign. The offense really has changed since they got rid of Shane Waldron and brought in Thomas Brown. And hopefully that's something that will continue going forward, because it is now Caleb Williams that he is this season. He is the goal to keep him going and to keep him developing. And hopefully next season, if there are changes made, he'll come out ready to go and to do what Bears fans were hoping was going to happen this season.
Yeah, Kieran, when you look at the Vikings, though, I just find it a very interesting case. It's weird the rumors that start swirling around the internet, the idea that the Vikings might somehow go for Daniel Jones to help join their team, which I'm not quite sure. I feel like that's more clickbait than anything else. But the fact that there's still even a hint of a question mark over the quarterback position is very unusual for a team sitting at 9-2. But then you look at some of the aspects of yesterday's game. I think Justin Jefferson didn't get a single catch at all in the second half. He had a big 20-yard catch in overtime and a few in the first half when they ended up getting up. But completely, so big parts of the game where not only him, but other parts of that Vikings offense are very quiet. And then you look at the way that the defense and the special teams managed to let the Bears back into the game, give them an avenue back into the game. And look, they managed to come away with a victory, fair play to them. But we talked about so much about how teams are, what the record says they are. Do you think that the Vikings really are good value for their 9-2 record when you're considering all of the other teams in the league who probably show greater fundamentals week to week? The Vikings, in fairness to them, are managing to get wins, so you can't really knock them on that. But I'm not sure how much trust I have in them the further we get into the season.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're playing in an extremely difficult and very competitive division, and to have a 9-2 record out of the NFC North that's a very, very commendable trait. They're not the frauds. I don't want to call them frauds from a couple of years ago where they basically won every game in the last second. But, I mean, like you said earlier with Jefferson didn't get much action. But then, you got Aaron Jones. I mean, they had three guys with over 100 yards. Aaron Jones at 106, Jordan Addison at 162. He went off. And TJ Hawkinson had a really big game, 114 yards. So when you've these other weapons that if Jefferson's having an off day, if you're not targeting him as much, then, that says a lot about that offense, that kind of rounded out offense that we talk about in the league. And Aaron Jones, again, that's a great performance from yesterday. Kind of to echo what Noel said, that I did pick the Bears last week. I thought they would have enough. But again, the Caleb arrow is trending upwards. I thought he had a great game. Just like Noel said, he was threading the ball through, and it was very reminiscent. That's the closest game I've seen him since his USC days, where he was just cavalier Brett Favre-esque, just throwing balls in the tightest of windows, scrambling to the left, scrambling to the right, taking the team on his shoulders and bringing them back. Because we all thought the Bears were out of it. And, again, credit to Darnold for that game-winning drive. But still, it's another game for Caleb in his toolbox to kind of learn from and to trend upwards a little bit more. But the Vikings, 9-2, they're a very solid team. That defense, we talked about them nearly every week, is pretty. Is Darnold going to be the one that's going to lead them deep in the playoffs? Who knows? But at this stage, they're doing exactly what they need to do. They're putting up numbers on teams. They're coming back. Even when they're not on form against the Jags, they still manage to ground out a win. So you're winning when you're not playing well. You're winning when you are playing well. They're doing exactly what they need to do. And it's another comeback win from the Vikings. And again, like I said, 9-2, they are rolling.
I suppose you can't really ask for much more than that. Maybe I'm being slightly too harsh. Brian, before we move on, we'll touch on one game that we did manage to have an in-depth conversation last night into reaction. That is the Broncos versus Las Vegas. A bit of news coming out from this is that Gardner Minshew has been ruled out for the rest of the season with a collarbone injury. Be interesting to see what Las Vegas do at the quarterback position over the course of the week ahead of their Black Friday game against the Chiefs. But I think the bigger talking point is what is going on with the Broncos. I think it's quite clear that Cortland Sutton and Bo Nix are on the same page. There's a lot to like about the way that the Broncos have been playing the last couple of weeks. In the context of this season, as I was saying earlier, a lot of the Broncos' victories have been against sub 500 teams. It's another one against sub 500 teams, but we really can't knock teams being able to grind out wins in the NFL, regardless of who they're against. It really shouldn't be, I guess, judging them too much by the quality of the opponent. Yeah, that is the point I'll probably go back on when I talk about the Dolphins later on. But I think it is a fair point in the Broncos case that, their rookie quarterback and the process they put into to build Bo Nix from the very get-go is starting to really come up with results here.
Yeah, well, Sean Payton was adamant after the draft. He was their first choice all along, and they had him graded above the quarterbacks, in which we just discussed in Williams. And obviously we haven't come to the Janelle Daniels conversation around yesterday, but yesterday, for me, was more impressive in the manner that they won, because he didn't play quite well in the first half. He was off. Cortland Sutton wasn't involved in the game in the first half. I think they only scored 3 field goals in the first half. They were 13-9 down at halftime yesterday, and Cortland Sutton had 1 reception for 17 yards, and he wasn't getting any looks. They couldn't really run the ball effectively compared to what they did last week against the Falcons. But you always got the sense there was no panic about this team, and ultimately they would find a way to get it done. And the connection in the second half, Cortland Sutton's numbers in the second half were off the charts compared to the first half. And he had another 6 receptions in the second half, 2 touchdowns. And it was the manner of the touchdowns in particular. And I think the second was more spectacular in terms of the accuracy and that kind of eye the needle type stuff, and where he actually was able to get it in. It just shows a quarterback that's maturing very quickly in the league. I would pump the brakes slightly, and I'm not trying to downplay Bo Nix, but we've seen CJ Stroud regress very quickly in his second year compared to what we saw last year. So I'm always reluctant to get really excited about quarterbacks, because we can quickly see it come crashing down. But right now, this Broncos team are going in the right direction. They play the Browns this weekend, then they have a bye week, and then they play the Colts at home. There's two big games, and if they were to get over the line with those 2 games, then really they are in a prime position to go to the playoffs. But their defense, again, did what they did. They weren't playing against a stellar offense in the Raiders, but they did yesterday what they needed to do to make sure that the Broncos were in a position to go and win this game effectively in the fourth quarter. And it was a 10-point win. It was a comfortable, but even in the end, there was an opportunity for the Raiders to game with a garbage time touchdown, and it didn't come to fruition. But it's a big win, because these divisional games are really scrappy, and the Raiders brought the Broncos to a certain extent down to their level yesterday and made it very difficult for them. But ultimately, the better team won and got over the line, and kind of signifies where both teams are right now. One is going to be in the sweepstakes potentially for Daniel Jones this week to give him an opportunity to audition for a new role next season, and another team that look like they've found their quarterback of the future.
Kieran, we were talking myself and Brian, we're laughing at the fact that the 2 games we brushed over in the preview show last week ended up being the D2 most entertaining matchups of the early window. I'm going to come to you on Texans Titans. Interesting one. We were saying last night that Will Levis performed strong. CJ Stroud threw a couple of interceptions. There was a lot of turning points in the game that ended up being 32 points to 27. But something I just want to come back to is the fact that despite the fact that Joe Mixon, who we talk about as being the missing piece from what's been going on in Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Bengals, who have had no run game this year, He played it really good against the Cowboys on Monday Night Football last week. Comes into this game for 14 carries, gets a grand total of 22 yards, an almost non-existent running game, which is amazing considering that he scored 3 touchdowns with just 20 carries of the ball the week beforehand. And I think it is a microcosm of the kind of inconsistency which we are seeing from the Texans this year. Now, it probably doesn't matter so much because they're in a division where the Jags have fallen off, the Colts haven't been able to get a run, and the Titans have generally been weak. But I don't know. I'm still yet to be fully convinced by this Texans team that they are the phenomenon we were expecting them to be. And fair play to the Titans, they managed to get out a big win yesterday, but there's a lot of areas where I think the Texans really need to find some consistency, and they just cannot follow up a big win like they did against Dallas with another strong performance the following week.
Yeah, this game was a bit mad too. I mean, right from the jump, I mean, the Texans went out to their early lead, and you thought, well, there it is. There's your dog walk. But yeah, you're right. This is I've spoken about being concerned about the Texans. I'm very, very concerned about the Texans now. And is the absence of Diggs more than we might have thought it had been? Because Tank Dell is not the force he was last year. And yes, Nico Collins is Nico Collins, but that offense again is not. There's something up with it. There's something amiss with this team, and despite the weapons they have on defense too, there's just Stroud is it's that classic sophomore slump. Was all the press and all the credit? Was it fully justified? Did he just luck out that first season? Is he now regressing towards the mean? There's a lot of those questions in play right now. Mixon, yeah, like you said, 22 yards. I mean, you're not going to do a lot, and with 22 yards on the ground from him, but just a mad game back and forth. I mean, Levis threw a pick, and you thought the game was done after that. But credit the Titans. I've always said, unless the Titans get a complete game from everybody on that offense, they're not really going to have a chance. Pollard put in a huge performance. So did Ridley. And Levis, Levis threw only 24 times, but he had 278 yards. Was sacked 8 times. I want to put that in there too, but still, it's a credit to his kind of resilience that the head did drop when he threw that pick later in the game, but they kept swinging, and it was a scrappy game. It was a very strange game. It was a back and forth. But is anyone surprised that the Texans lost? No, there's a lot of problems there still. A 7-5 team who nobody thought they'd be in this position. I thought they were going to be in the AFC Championship game. They may still be in that way, but they're not trending that way right now. There's a lot of problems with Houston. And again, Stroud it doesn't look the same player. He says he's struggling too. So, concerned about the Texans. Credit the Titans. Is it something that's going to light their season? No, this is a one-off for the Titans. They're not going to get a game the rest of the season with Pollard balling out like he did, 119 yards on 24 carries, or even Ridley showing up. Really hasn't shown up all season, but it's a nice win for the Titans. It'll make them feel good. They moved to 3-8. It's a good result for the Giants in the Tankathon. So it's one of those mad games that pop up in the NFL, usually every week. But very concerned for the Texans. Very concerned for them down the stretch. I think they have the Jags next week in Jacksonville. I mean, I wouldn't even guarantee a win of that game. So we'll see what happens with Houston and Stroud going forward.
Brian, you want to make a quick point about the Titans?
Yeah, actually, Kieran's just pulled it in there at the end. The Jags and the Titans have to play each other twice. They haven't played each other at all yet, so 2 flip-flop games to come, and it'll probably be significant in the manner of who actually ends up being the first pick in the draft come April next year, because these teams could, the Jags right now are 2 wins, but Kieran's point, you probably still have a feeling that the Jags could come out on top in that game on Sunday, and even vice versa when they play each other again later on in the season. So, strangely enough, these 2 games, which will have very little riding on it, will probably have the biggest impact over the course of who's going to be selecting at the top end of the draft come April.
We really have to start looking at playoff brackets now, Noel. And when I'm looking at the playoff bracket for the NFC, I'm just seeing the Commanders just about hang on to that 7th seed as we are currently sitting. They ended up managing to seal a 3rd loss in a row, doing so against the Dallas Cowboys, a team we were looking forward to seeing on Thursday. And one of the crazier games of the weekend, and one that we, in our infinite wisdom, decided to completely write off as an almost secure win for the Commanders as we were previewing this one. I'm not quite sure how much I can really I can read into this because, as we were mentioning last night, of course, these are two divisional rivals. They're used to each other. They always play hard. There was a lot of weird things going on between missed field goals and blocked field goals and all that kind of special team stuff. With special teams is an area which really counted for the Commanders against them this time, as opposed to being for them, as has often been the case earlier this season. But the Commanders, I think, if they really want to try and regain control of their playoff push, considering that the Jaden Daniels had throwing a couple of picks yesterday as well, I don't know whether it's a case of we're being worried. Have they peaked a little bit too early this season? Will they get back on track? Very difficult to get a read on where they are sitting at currently at this point in the season.
It is. And look, they start the season like a house on fire. They're absolutely flying. And I think maybe sometimes we can get ahead of ourselves when a team looks like they're doing really well so early in the season. I mean, usually over time, they kind of balance out to who they are. Look, we know the Commanders made some really good moves in the offseason, some really good, what would you say, steady moves to kind of just to bring the franchise back to an even keel and to get everything kind of back to normal and go from there. And they started really well. Jaden Daniels looked like the rookie of the year at the start of the season. He was just on top form, on the ground, in the air. It was just all happening for him. He had a great run game. When Terry McLaurin there gives him a great option. As you say, recently it's just kind of slowed down a bit, and we'll kind of see as it goes forward. They'll slip into their natural who they are, whether they are the great team at the start or whether they're maybe a little behind that, which I think they probably will be. But I mean, what a game yesterday! I mean, I hope nobody left after the third quarter thinking it wasn't great and there wasn't that many scores, because I think there was 41 points. It was 24-17 to the Cowboys in the fourth quarter alone. I mean, that's just crazy. But I mean, these divisional games can do this. Two teams who are rivals, who know each other inside out. I think it's a great win for the Cowboys, but it's not going to do anything for them in terms of playoffs and stuff. Just for them, things were going so bad. It's nice for them just to kind of stop the rot and get a good win against a rival. But yeah, look, for the Commanders, we'll see. Daniels, he still puts on the numbers: 275 yards in the air, 74 on the ground. You mentioned 2 interceptions. I think Austin Eckler was injured. I don't know if that's been confirmed, if he's going to be out for a while or what. That could be a big loss. He was a player who came in and carried a good load for them. But yeah, look, we'll just see now what way this Commanders team goes. There's going to be some questions asked for them. There's going to be some pressure put on in terms of that playoff spot. And we're going to find out exactly who this team are. I do worry a bit for Daniels kind of going forward. I think question marks about his slight frame. You wonder, is he fully fit at the moment? He's had injuries. And that as well is going to be something to watch and to see how that develops over the next few weeks.
Do I mention the Giants at this point? Is this the point where I move on to that part of the conversation? It was definitely a tough watch for anybody from a New York perspective, not so much of a tough watch for people from a Florida perspective. So I'm not quite sure. I'm sure it's a slightly balanced view coming from our Florida man, Kieran, on this one. It was really interesting to see Baker Mayfield pull out the Tommy Cutlett's hands as he was doing his celebration. Which he says was out of position of respect for Tommy DeVito. I'm not quite sure if the fans in New York saw it that way, but it definitely seems like this is a team in free fall. And the point that is being made by a lot of New York media, and I think you were mentioning it off air as well, is this, unlike previous defeats for the Giants in the last couple of years, this is the first time now where it really feels like that Shane and Dayball are nearing the point where we're getting fired. We're not quite sure how much players are playing for the club anymore. And, it was always maybe not presumed, but expected that their positions were relatively secure no matter what way things were going on the field. But that's definitely not how people are feeling in Big Blue Nation today.
Today, November 25th, is the day that I'm officially out. Let it be written, let it be done. I'm officially out on Dable and Shane. I said after the Panthers game, there was no way that the stink could be washed off of the Panthers game. This was even worse. I mean, this was even worse. Right from the jump, DeVito got sacked, and that's how it was. That's how it was the rest of the game. You can see, me and Brian, we follow a lot of different people. That you've got, Giants Insider, you got the Talking Giants guys, and they're up in the stands. The place is empty in the third quarter. Now, if that doesn't tell Mara it's time to shut it down and gut it out, then I don't know what is. I think that's where we are with the Giants right now. The locker room, the sound bites afterwards were just pathetic. Neighbors doesn't know what's going on. Sexy Dexy is saying that, they play like shit. Everybody else is just, it's the same old story. the worst thing that could happen to the Giants was probably beating the Vikings in that or getting the playoffs a couple of years ago, because that's it. That was the peak of it. And ever since then, it's gone downhill with Shane and Dable. No fight, no leaders. Any of the leaders they had on the team, they've got rid of. McKinney, Leonard Williams, Saquon. You're just left with a bunch of either free agents or rookies, and it's not a good team. There's no leadership. There's no accountability. What they put out in the field was absolutely putrid. It looks like Dable has lost the locker room. His demeanor, even everything is just terrible right now in Giants world. The optics are awful. They're mocked constantly on social media. The Giants play here 4 p.m. on Thursday. The entire country is doing nothing except sitting on the couch watching football on Thursday afternoon. Giants are playing the Cowboys. I have no faith that the Giants will put up more than 10 points. It'll be another meme fest, another GIF fest. It'll just be joke after joke. The Giants are a running joke right now. And I'm sure people are telling Mara that they're a running joke. Again, not to labor the Saquon point, but everything that Saquon does amplifies the decision Shane made. It's just, I don't think there's any way you come back from this. I think this is it. I think that the worst part is there's still 6 games left in the season. If there was 2 games left, like it was with Judge, you'd let it ride out. But like, what do they do now? Because there's still a month and a half left of the season where they've got to go through the motions. The only good thing that will come out of this is a top 3 draft pick. Even then, I've said it before, I'm not sold on any of the quarterbacks coming out. There's no sure things. A lot of talk that people were watching Shedeur Sanders on Saturday in Colorado. I mean, you're taking Dion with all that. Do you want that headache? Do you want to hand over the keys to Dion? Do you want him being the voice in the background if things aren't going well? So, between the fan, between Talking Giants, between, Giants Online stuff, it's just, it's the kind of, the talk now is trending towards, it's got to be it for Shane and Dable. And if Shane goes, Dable has to go. And if that's the case, then you got to gut it, rip it down. Mara doesn't want to do it because it's going to be another 2 years of rinse and repeat from Judge and from Shermer and from McAdoo. But there's no other option. The locker room is lost. Shane's drafts. I mean, shit, I could go on for the next 20 minutes. Not that anyone wants to hear that, but the drafts have been terrible for Shane. I mean, I could take a letter from A through Z and just go on a 5-minute rant about what's wrong with the Giants. But I won't. I'll let Brian say something because I know he's itching to go.
You get so hung up in the season, you get hung up in your own team, and because we do this, you get hung up on every team to a certain extent, and then you take time out to look at certain storylines. And I saw the snip today, and Kieran alluded to Leonard Williams. I agreed at the time with the trade, or in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the right thing to do. He's playing really well now at the moment with Seattle. But Julian Love was a big blow to lose him. You lose Saquon. You're losing players that are not just players on the field. You're losing players that are in the locker room, that are real leaders of men. McKinney, to a certain extent, albeit. Again, I could understand the nature of why you let him go and you bring in Tyler Newman, who looks like is a good find in the draft. But you've lost players that were the key elements to why this team went to the playoffs 2 years ago. And then you have a week in which, whether you like Daniel Jones or not, it's reflective of how they played yesterday, and it's reflective of the sound bites we had on Thursday, Friday, of how much he was appreciated in the locker room, and they haven't handled that over the course of the last week. And whatever you think again of Daniel Jones, to have him out there playing safety on Thursday and in practice, and safety in a situation where it's open to the media to come in and watch certain parts of that practice, and he's doing that in front of the media, that's no way to treat the guy, and it's kind of really bad. And then he's down to the 4th string quarterback, and you're bringing in Tim Boyle off the practice squad into your practice squad. Like, the whole thing over the last week has been mismanaged from the top down to the bottom, and Mara has a part to play in that. And the more I watch the Hard Knocks and you see the snippets, you wonder how much of that was orchestrated to make sure Mara came out the right side of the optics of him saying, "Oh, I really wanted to keep Barkley." And look, it probably does need to be dismantled. And I didn't think it would come to this. I thought genuinely when he did say a few weeks ago, you laugh and you go, "Oh, we've been here before. We've heard this piece before," where he says it, and then ultimately these guys end up getting relieved of their duties. But the way it's going, it's untenable. Like, they're going to lose to the Cowboys on Thursday, and then they're going to play teams. They've got the Ravens coming up. Like, it's over. Like, as fans are leaving the stadium in the fourth quarter, and when Mara sees that, that's what really gets him more than anything, because he doesn't want to see other fans come in MetLife and enjoy the afternoon supporting the team who's winning comfortably, never mind winning games competitively. And we've seen that over the last few years. We're not seeing that now. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. There you go.
Well, no, Kieran was referring to earlier the fact that all of America will be watching that on 4 o'clock as the Giants kick off against the Cowboys. And I think maybe the thing that will keep them watching is the fact that Lainey Wilson, the country music star, will be performing at halftime. And according to the press release in the NFL, she's promoting her Whirlwind album, which reminds me of the Whirlwinds, which I always get when I'm trying to figure out what to think about the Miami Dolphins. Surely I felt quite angry as they managed to put a big beating down on the New England Patriots yesterday in Miami. Tua Tagovailoa is now 7-0 against New England in his career, so it's nice that there's the sense of ownership is starting to change over in that division, considering that the Josh Allen has generally owned him over the past couple of years. But what we're looking at now at the playoff picture, and when you see the guys that are on the bubble in the NFC, you got the Cardinals, you got the Buccaneers, you got the Rams and the Niners. They're all with a half decent chance of making it into that 7 seed spot. You look at the AFC side of things, and the Dolphins are the top of that on the bubble pile. They're currently the 8th seed if we were to stop today, but of course they are at 5 and 6. You know, they need to try and better the record of the Ravens and the Broncos, who are currently on 7 wins each. And, you know, they're given a playoff probability of 15%. And when you look at the performances the Dolphins have put in so far this year, the wins they've gotten have been against the Jaguars, who are crap, the Patriots, who are crap, the Rams, okay, that was a pretty good win. The Raiders, who are crap, and the Patriots again, who were a second time crap. And I'm not quite sure how much we can really put our chest behind what's going on in Miami right now. I read out some stats last night in the instant reaction, thinking that Tua was back, and look, they're on a 3-game win streak. They may be building up some momentum. You look at some of the games that they have coming ahead of them as well. I think that the most difficult game they have is going to be on Thanksgiving against the Green Bay Packers, because the games that they have between now and the end of the year involve playing against the Houston Texans, which, as we know, could drop a dud, the 49ers, who, as you know, could drop a dud, and the Jets twice, and Jameis Winston's Browns. Now, there's plenty of banana skins in there, but when we're trying to evaluate how much of pressure they can really put in the wintertime, when the whole cliche around Miami is definitely a sense that they generally don't play that well in the winter, they can't play strong in the winter, I don't know how much I can really put stock into them. Or maybe I'm just an embittered Patriots fan after they gave us a big hammering. But all the talk now that the Dolphins are back, that what Tua is doing is going to all of a sudden really push a big gust of wind behind this team. And look, it's not just Tua, it's Achane, it's Hill, it's the entire offensive system, it's the way that some of the defensive players have been performing as well. I'm still not fully convinced, because my confidence in the team was so drained with the fact that once Tua was taken out of the picture, nobody else stepped up to manage to pull out a win. The defense managed to pull out a couple of good performances, but even then, it wasn't good enough. So no, maybe I'm looking at it from with the bias hat on. But how much can we really expect the Dolphins to make a charge now to make that final wildcard spot in the AFC?
Yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to say, because you make a great point. You know, when Tua wasn't there, you expected leaders on a team that was highly touted, especially on offense, to step up and to make that difference, and they didn't. So, look, Tua obviously makes a big difference. Results show that now. They have the weapons. You mentioned Achane, Waddle, Hill. Waddle had a really good game there yesterday. So they have the firepower to do it. And you mentioned the games coming up. They are winnable for this team. I thought it would be a tougher run in, but how it's kind of developed with certain teams like the Jets, you kind of fancy the Dolphins now being good enough to get the wins. But I always worry about the Dolphins. They always feel like they have this amazing, exciting offense. They have the ability to put up points, but then at times they just don't, for whatever reason, especially if the weather isn't exactly, warm enough like it would be in Miami. They have a couple of trips there that could be cold, and maybe that could have an impact on the game. So, no, I mean, I'm like you. They definitely have the firepower to do it, but it's something about the Dolphins that feels like they're not totally solid all the time, and they could trip up in games that you wouldn't expect it. So, again, it'll be interesting to see how it works out. And I'm like you, probably not, but we'll see.
Yes, you will see. Well, look, I think that is enough week 12 talk for now. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us once again tonight. For anybody who's listened to us on podcast form from Tuesday onwards, thank you very much for listening to us again. As it is Thanksgiving week, our program for the week will be slightly different. I will be talking hopefully to a beat writer, which will have a podcast for you on Wednesday morning. On Wednesday, we will be previewing the Thanksgiving and Black Friday slate of games. And on Black Friday itself, we will be live at 7 o'clock, slightly earlier this week. And on Friday, not Thursday, as you preview the weekend's action, it'll be a nice little warm-up back before the Chiefs and the Raiders kick off at 8 o'clock, which I have to say, based on last year's experience, is the absolute perfect time to sit at home and watch a game on a Friday evening. So, but for now, for everybody who's listened to us, thank you very much for joining the Irish NFL Show.